my words. I think mathematically it's probably very unlikely, but he's going to try to make a go of it and get back to 50%. It's his final ChessKid Youth Championship because he'll be too old next year. Let's move on to round 9.
Let's move on to the penultimate round. And here we're seeing Ryo. I think he can play the role of spoiler, and he's playing white against Andy. So Andy there with 5 points. He wants to be finishing this event with 2 points in order to secure that spot into the semifinals. And Tani is now playing Faustino. Shall we go to this particular game as we're seeing a Queen's Indian on the board and also Aaron there with 4.5 points. He's not out of it as he plays Megan.
I couldn't agree more. Tani's on 6. If he's able to beat Fausti, Tani gets to 7, and he absolutely punches his ticket. Even a draw gets him really close, but a win absolutely gets him where he needs to be. Tani is fresh off the OTB performance of his life. He scored a 2640 performance rating in St. Louis and got a GM norm. So he's riding his hot streak here in this tournament, and he's done the best he's ever done. By the way, it's his final ChessKid Youth Championship as well. He will age out next year. He's making the most of it, and he's got a really good chance to advance to Sunday if he can navigate this Queen's Indian.
Yes, and you see, we join in when Faustino has made an inaccuracy, going knight to d7. It did invite like e2, e4, which is kind of the idea that you want to be doing in this, but to b3, I think is very harshly judged by the engine, because you just get your bishop going. E4 is there on the agenda, and then you can just simply enjoy the space. So why is E4 not being played by our players? Oh, that's finally make an appearance.
Yeah, right on cue. Now this game has taken on sort of a King's Indian setup, especially if the pawn pushes. Okay, even after it takes, it's still got that King's Indian flair with the fianchettoed bishop and with the hole on the d4 square. In fact, we might go back to a Maroczy bind. I generally take with the pawn in these positions, but maybe knight takes is a little bit in the air. The idea of taking with the pawn is that you have this d4 square, on lockdown. Now, of course, it might still happen after knight takes knight, but if white doesn't play knight takes knight, then this square is not quite as weak. He does play knight takes knight, though. I'm fully expecting pawn takes, yeah. The knight jumps in. We have another Maroczy bind type setup. But this is not quite as good as a normal King's Indian because you don't have any of the f5 stuff. Your queen is quite passive. c5 might even come one day. Feels like a good position for white to have.
It feels very, very pleasant. And I tell you, there's been some news into the other games. Megan defeated Aaron Mendes. So that means that Aaron is probably out of the chase in the quest to get those semi-final spots, finishing in the top 2. So what we're seeing instead from Tani, he didn't quite go for the c5 plan. That's still there. He's instead decided to double on the D line. I thought this was very natural. Again, the engine being, I think, overly harsh, because it's a very natural plan. Just take control of the D line and then you can back that up. But maybe he needed to trade off knights first in order to stop black from rerouting the knight to c5.
Yeah, Aaron is on 50%, so even if he wins, +1 is tough. Now, +1 did get to a tiebreak in our under 13 championship. That's only because Bodona scored 9.5, I think, and tipped the scales a little bit. Megan actually checkmated in 24 moves as black, so an awesome game by her. But we're going to keep it here because this game has the most impact on the standings. Knight back to d7, judged pretty harshly because bishop h3, and that knight's in a terrible pin with the rook already lined up with it and possible knight moves, which would make discovered attacks. Even knight to b4 might be the idea, but it's missed. Instead, weirdly, the bishop goes to the other diagonal. It's the contrapositive of the computer's suggestion, but that bishop's aiming at a bunch of hot air. I guess knight e7 was a small threat, but bishop to f8 stops the threat. Bishop h3 is still there, and it's funny. We're slicing and dicing here on both sides of the board.
Yeah, and I was going to say bishop h3 is a bit of a silent killer because somehow you don't necessarily look in that direction. But once you see it, it's so obvious. Okay, so now the threats are, as you're pointing out, knight to b4, knight to f6 is also there. Again, you have a very comfortable pin. You can even double up on the D line, and it's very difficult for black to just untangle. Here, bishop takes, and now you go knight to f6. Okay, black is dropping material. You got to drop an exchange. Knight takes rook. And actually, What does this mean for Faustino if he loses?
It's a good question. If I take a look at the standings here, got a lot of monitors open, but if Faustino loses, then Tani punches his ticket, and then it's all eyes on Andy's game, because if Andy wins, then Andy would jump up above Faustino. So it's a pretty bad result for Faustino if he doesn't win. He's not completely out of it, but he will need to win and look at the scoreboard, as we say, because he'll have to keep an eye on Andy's game. Let me just see if they play by chance in the 10th round. They do not play in the 10th round. Andy plays Tani and Fausti plays Aaron. So very important. If Fausti can hold the draw here, that will mean so much to his chances. If he's not, then Tani wins and Tani would go through, and then Andy would be in the driver's seat. But Andy is completely equal in his game. So a little bit of scoreboard watching by us, but let's keep it here and see if Tani can convert with the extra exchange. He's got the open lines, which is what you're looking for. Once the queen finds any sort of invasion square, it feels pretty difficult to hold off all of the heavies.
Yeah, no, as you mentioned, opening up lines, that is the currency of the attack. And so I was expecting some kind of ideas such as h4. That's the English school of chess. You can never go wrong with h4, h5, and seeing what happens next. And instead, we're seeing some nice maneuvering, but the seconds, they are ticking down. And Faustino, he's making life difficult, actually, because although we have two open lines, there aren't too many entry squares for the rooks.
Yeah, the bishop and queen and rook are just perfectly guarding every single possible invasion. I think it is the weakness of the e-pawn that white needs to go for, and right on cue, queen c3 happens because the bishop has to choose a very lazy square. Now d7 opens up. Maybe you switch to put both rooks in the d file because bishop e6 is no longer possible. Instead, white goes for the pass c-pawn idea. Okay, that guards d7 in a different way, maybe a better way, and the rooks are finally invading. It took forever, but it's finally happening. You got to keep an eye on the e-pawn. If the e-pawn falls, black's defense falls.
And there was a threat of a checkmate on h6, so that's why black played g5. But there we're seeing white's attack. It is a killer and a win for Tani. And that means he punches his ticket into tomorrow's semifinals. But Faustino,